Hello everyone, welcome to our event Next Stop Assessment for Learning. Next Stop Assessment for Learning consists of 5 webinars. So this is the second session, and please do not forget to register for the upcoming sessions. Today's session, Choosing Your Way, will be about how to go from knowing about assessment for learning to actually making it happen in your classrooms and the decisions that you need to make that happen. My name is Pablo Toledo and I work as Assessment Services Manager for Cambridge Assessment English in the Southern Cone and Andes region. Presenting this session, we have my colleagues and good friends Alberto Costa and Rafael Carpanes. Alberto Costa is a Senior Assessment Services Manager Americas for Cambridge Assessment English. He has worked as a teacher trainer, and has also worked as a course tutor for the teaching qualifications CELTA and Delta. He works for Cambridge Assessment English, and assessment and continuing professional development are some of his key interests. Rafael Carpanes is currently the Business Development and Marketing Manager for Michigan Language Assessment. He has been in the ELT field for over 20 years, working as a teacher trainer, and academic consultant. Neuroscience applied to education and assessment are some of his main interests.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for being here with us today. I am speaking from Brazil. I'm based in São Paulo, so is my colleague Rafael. And I would like to start by wishing all the Brazilian teachers Happy Teachers Day. I know we have teachers from many different countries in the Americas, so congratulations to all the teachers who are attending the webinar today.
Thank you. I would like to say Happy Teachers Day to all the Brazilian teachers as well. It's a pleasure to be here. We have somehow, I've been a teacher, Alberto as well, so it's a great pleasure for us to host and to share some ideas during this event.
Thank you, Rafael. What we're going to go through this session today is the following. We're going to start with a very brief assessment for learning recap, because my colleague Pablo, who was speaking just now, talked about assessment for learning last Tuesday together with Johnny Frank. We are going to talk about diagnostic assessment in more detail, then formative assessment. We will also describe and share with you some techniques and instruments for both diagnostic and formative assessment. Then we'll provide the references. And then Pablo will come in to talk about the upcoming webinars and also to lead the question and answer moment for this webinar. Now with you, Rafael.
Okay, so we would like to get started by actually getting a little bit philosophical, and we're going to share a quote from Dylan Wiliam, which in our opinion was essential to this webinar. So of course you can read on the screen, so I'm not going to actually read word for word. But we really believe that assessment is actually a bridge. The teacher does a lot of things, tries many techniques in the classroom, and we always want to actually check the best outcome towards and from our students. But sometimes there is a little bit of a difference, there is a gap there. So we really believe, and of course, according to an authority on assessment, that actually assessment itself is the bridge between what the teacher is conveying as a message, all the knowledge that he's trying to show the students, learners, and so on, and the way to actually verify, check, make sure that this knowledge is being actually processed and students are able to have some kind of performance based on it, is actually assessment. It's a very powerful tool. So I would like to actually invite you to reflect on this great quote. Okay, so again, assessment is the bridge between teaching and learning. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so one thing that is very important, as it has been noted before, so this is part of a series of other webinars. So we would like to recap a little bit, so we are all on the same page and just making sure that we are following the same steps. So very briefly, actually let's get started on an activity. This is a question that is very specific about summative assessment. So as you can see on your screen, there is a definition. So on summative assessment, if you cannot read, so ongoing assessment guides what happens next, a kind of purpose. So please, I would like to give you a few maybe seconds for you to type in the Q&A part of Zoom if this is true or false. So you can just put number 1 and then letter A or B. Okay, so once more, there is a definition. Summative assessment refers to ongoing assessment, guides what happens next, a kind of purpose. So you type in the chat 1A if you believe this is true, and 1B if you believe this is false. And we will monitor.
Rafael, have already typed in the chat here. A lot of people are saying B, and they are saying that this is false. So most of the answers are B. Is this right or wrong, do you think?
Okay, let's roll the drums and let's see what comes next. Okay. So, well, again, thank all of you for participating. Make sure that you are with us and contributing through the chat. Of course, here we are going to tap into some definitions, check a few things. Don't worry if you didn't actually, get this wrong. We will actually see from the next slides that some things are interconnected, some things complement each other. So, but ultimately, I mean, this sentence would actually be considered false. Okay. So again, yeah, thanks for participating.
Question 2 now.
Yes. Okay, so now we are moving on to question number 2, which is about formative assessment. And in this case, the definition is ongoing assessment. So one definition, guides what happens next and a kind of purpose. Okay, so same thing. This time you will type 2, so we see which activity you are referring to, and you will choose either A or B if the sentence is true or if the sentence is false. And maybe Alberto has some comments.
We made it really easy for them,
Yeah.
If we gave the answer to number 1, we made it really easy for everyone. Let's look at the chat and see what people are typing. Most people are, of course, saying this is true. And a lot of people are saying A, yeah. Shall we show the answer?
So roll the drums. And the answer is true. Yes. Okay. So exactly as the definition says, it is what we are going to discuss. And actually, since we moved to the next slide, I would like to play a little bit with the words. Okay. So as you can see here on the screen, we do have the difference between formative assessment and summative assessment. There is, of course, the reference where we took this from, but I would like to call your attention to the fact that we have 2 different words there. So we have formative assessment. We can think of it as assessment for learning. So it will always collaborate. It will always give more tools for actually learning to happen in a specific context. Okay, and in terms of summative assessment, we can think of assessment of learning. Okay, so probably the teacher has specific objectives, some guidelines on where he or she wants to go, and wants to make sure that the students, learners, know that specific content. So here again, we would like to stress this kind of play with words about, again, formative assessment, assessment for learning, and summative assessment, assessment of learning. Okay, and as you can see on the image to the right, it is very, very important, and I'm sure we all do that in a way or another, but it's very good to see in an image where is our starting point as teachers and as students as well as learners, so we can actually better help them. Okay, so here is the first definitions there, or actually images, is where the learner is going. Okay, assessment as a whole is very important if we know exactly where we want to get, managing assessment, and where the students should get by the end of a specific cycle, journey, or program. Okay, and then right after that, we need to know, for instance, where this student, this learner, is starting from. Okay, is he in the very beginning? Has he already reached some of the outcomes or some of the goals that you as a teacher has designed for him or for that specific course? And then, as you can see, the question, and again, I'm going to play a little bit with the words a little bit more, talking about Dylan William. How can the learner get there? I mean, what is the bridge? What can we use as instruments, as tools? What is the bridge that we can offer students and the teachers can see clearly that will enable them to support students in this specific journey? So very briefly, the reference is there, and in the end of the webinar, we will provide all the references so you can download the files, check all these great ideas. And this was taken from Cambridge Assessment International Education, as you can see on the screen.
Great, Rafael. Well, continuing now, I have another quiz here. The last question that we're going to use for the quiz. Is this true or false? After Rafael's presentation here, assessment for learning helps in making understanding and knowledge more visible. Is that true or false? Can you please use the chat to type your answers? You can put 3A or 3B. I need to have a quick look at the chat and see how the answers are coming up. A lot of people typing 3A, 3A, hello, okay. Yes, yes, excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. The answer is actually true. Assessment for learning helps in making understanding and knowledge more visible. And this understanding and knowledge becoming more visible has a lot to do with collecting information about learners and giving them feedback on their learning, right? Okay, so today we are going to talk about the functions of assessment. So in very broad terms, we can say that assessment has three main functions. Formative assessment, as we discussed at the very beginning. It has to do with assessment on a day-to-day basis. Diagnostic assessment to make sure that we check learners' understanding of something or how much they already know about something that we wish to present. And we have summative assessment, which means the formal assessment that we can do after a period of instruction. And this is usually a moment where we need to check how much learners have learned. So we want to check their achievement in terms of learning of the program, right? But for the purposes of this webinar, because next week we have some more webinars talking about summative assessment, we are going to focus more exclusively on formative and diagnostic assessment, right? Okay. Looking at formative and diagnostic assessment, we can see that they are very similar, but there are also differences. So the main difference between the two assessment types lies in how the gained understanding is used by the teacher. So what makes it diagnostic or formative is how the teacher gains understanding and how the teacher is going to use this understanding. Is it, for example, to provide support for a specific difficulty, or is it because the teacher needs to replan the program, etc. So these are the main differences. So we look at formative assessment, diagnostic assessment. In very general terms, we can define them like this. Formative, usually carried out within a topic. You want to understand current learning and you want to address areas of difficulties which are specific, or you want to address any gaps in knowledge or understanding of something that you are presenting now or learners are working on now. And so you are using strategies, ways, or practices to check their understanding for this specific point, right? Diagnostic, on the other hand, is usually carried out at the start of a new topic, for example. As I said, this is a broad definition. We are going to go deeper into those terms and what they actually mean. And diagnostic assessment is used to identify what learners already know and can do. Can do is a very important term today. And this will enable the teacher to plan the teaching content more specifically in order to address those gaps identified in the diagnostic assessment, okay? Right. What makes them also similar is that in either cases, or in both of the cases, what we want is we want to collect information and we want to provide feedback. There's no way that you can do assessment for learning if you don't put feedback in a very, very specific position. You need to provide feedback on a regular basis. It's either for formative purpose, something that is happening now, or diagnostic purpose because you spotted areas and then you need to provide the right support for learners, right? Now, Rafael will start talking about diagnostic assessment and formative assessment in more depth.
Thank you, Alberto. Can we please move on to the next slide? Okay. All right. So we do have the definitions there. And again, by the end of the webinar, we will provide them to you so you can check the sources and download the files. One thing that is extremely important here in the first definition is actually, in my opinion, is the insight, okay? So again, Alberto referred to feedback, and it's very important for the teacher to see the picture of what's going on with the students based on diagnostic assessment in this case, and to have ideas. I mean, what is my strategy? What is the tool that I can use? How can I better support this learner to make sure that he or she overcomes their difficulties, okay? So again, I'm going just to highlight a few words that are here. The definition is in your screen, and you will be able to see more details as we go through the presentation. For the second definition, my favorite group of words are actually targeted intervention. So again, if the teacher is able to identify where the learner is, what is happening, or the gap between what the teacher has proposed and where the student is, he can actually focus on a specific intervention, and he will be able sorry, they will be able to choose the right tools, and they will make sure that, again, these tools are the best possible tools for those specific learners. And also regarding always referring back to the word feedback that Alberto has already mentioned, and the word insight that is in the first definition. I mean, the teacher needs to actually share the information with learners, okay? It's very important, and again, feedback is something crucial here. The more the teacher shares with the learners where they are, how they are going to get there using the tools, and the objectives that are proposed for that specific cycle, program, even semester, or anything like that, it will be clear, again, for the teacher and for the student, and they will see a very specific path, okay? It's like they will have a GPS, both teacher and learners will have a GPS to know how they can go over this bridge, for instance. Okay. And in terms of formative assessment, we also have prepared a few things. We have some definitions. And again, as you can see, the reference is there. So the idea here is actually on a daily basis, on day-to-day basis, the students, learners, and teachers actually assess and know exactly where they have reached in a specific program, again, or based on specific objectives. Okay, and one of the highlights that we have for the second definition here is actually that formative assessment, for instance, begins, this is extremely important, begins with diagnostic assessment, okay? Again, as we have referred to a few times before, it's very important for the teacher and for the learner to know where the student is, the learner is in that specific scenario, and what the objectives are, and how, again, the teacher will be able to provide tools and will take the students, learners, to that specific outcome. Okay, Alberto, would you like to add anything? Okay.
No, I think I think it's great. I like the idea that you know, teachers and learners need to understand what gaps they need to address, and then plan the next steps based on this. I would like to share something here. We talked at the beginning that we are going to focus on formative and diagnostic assessment for the purposes of this specific webinar. But when we look at formative and diagnostic assessment, we need to consider that those strategies and practices for assessment, they are very important to build learners' confidence when they get to summative assessment. It's very important to remember that summative assessment is part of our lives. I mean, many students who are young now will in the future, you know, be participate in a recruitment process, and that will be a moment for summative assessment of some kind. They will be taking exams to complete their degree or to start a post-graduation course. That is another moment of summative assessment. So it's very important that we build this confidence for summative assessment, and formative and diagnostic assessment is good because it helps build confidence when the learner has sit some sort of summative assessment, be it devised by the school or be it external, like proficiency, a language proficiency, summative assessment, and international certificate, for example, right? Like we have in Michigan and Cambridge Assessment English. Well, we are going to talk about some techniques and instruments. We have been quite theoretical, right, Rafael? And Rafael is going to start with ideas for diagnostic assessment.
Okay. So yes, one of the most, I'm very excited about this because again, by the end of this webinar, we want to be able to offer ideas, tools, instruments, so you can leave this webinar with lots of things that you can put into practice. Okay, so some definitions of the things that we are going to offer. And they are very important, of course. Most teachers use course books. So most recent course books, they actually bring the end of a unit, which actually has specific goals. And some of them are also aligned, and they do have the can-do statements. So the teacher and the learner know exactly what is expected by the end of, again, that specific unit, that specific cycle or program, okay? Also, sample tests are extremely important because they do have a wealth of activities focusing on the 4 skills, and sometimes activities that are not extremely clear, even maybe for the learner and for the teacher. And it links completely, again, to the course book or to the program that they are following. Okay. Also, here I'm really going through a list. We do also have word lists, and we will show examples of these word lists and other resources. So, for instance, based on the Cambridge exams, we do have specific word lists for starters, movers, and flyers, and for the Michigan Young Learners English. The definition is a little different. We have the first one, which is bronze, silver, and gold. We also have these checklists, or actually word lists, that the teacher can check against what the students, learners have actually learned by the end of that specific cycle or exam, if they are preparing for the exam, as well as a key and preliminary from Cambridge assessment. You can also see that these resources are available, and we'll make them available to you. And again, as I mentioned, I love, and I have taken a look at several course books lately, and I love when in the beginning of the unit or chapter, there is actually the goals of that specific unit, and then by the end of that unit, you actually have the can-do statements that are aligned. So it shows, again, both where the students are starting from and where they are supposed to reach by the end of the unit. And also the teacher has tools and interventions that they can make in order to foster learning. Okay, so the handbooks for teachers, if for instance you cannot find that in a specific course book, you will be able to find that in handbooks for teachers based on specific exams. Okay, and now we are going to be a little bit more visual, and we are going to actually show examples of posters, both for MYLE. In this case, the exam that is called identified as silver, and starters for the Cambridge exams. So posters are, in my opinion, very, very fun if you're teaching this age group. Of course, you can also adapt them if you are then teaching teenagers. You will obviously have a different kind of images, a little bit more like a comic book, for instance. Here they look like a cartoon, maybe for teenagers, comic book like or style images. And of course, if you are, for instance, teaching adults, you can actually have a picture of maybe a supermarket, or you can, again, I love how course books have evolved in that sense, and nowadays they are extremely visual. So you will find those posters in several course books, but again, you have images on the internet just by searching some engines to make sure that you collect them, again, for kids, for teenagers, and for adults. Another one that I love is picture dictionaries. Okay, so if you have access to picture dictionaries, most of them actually have this visual aid that looks very much like word lists and posters, where you can check what has been done in the past. So you can cover what has been taught, and you can check against that specific program to see if the students are there. And it also gives you a glimpse of the future. I mean, if students have learned this or have not learned this, what should I do? What kind of intervention should I make use of? And I'm sure Alberto has something to add.
Yes, I would just like to say, Rafael, that with posters, now that many teachers are teaching remotely, they are also a good resource to show on the screen because they are big, they are colored, and they come out well for the student at the other end of the screen until we return to face-to-face teaching. So, if the posters are ready to use, I think it saves teachers time, it makes the lesson more interesting. And I would just like to say that along with the posters, we have booklets with classroom activities for teachers to use the posters with learners, and they come with adaptations for remote teaching as well, which I think is really good. The other thing I would like to add in terms of diagnosing knowledge and finding out what you need to plan or replan for learners is making sure that you use can-do statements. Nowadays, anything related to language learning, not only in the English language, but many other languages, you have the descriptors from the Common European Framework, and they have been like the basis for curriculum in course books, in teaching programs in schools. So it's very important that we familiarize ourselves with the expected descriptors or expected competencies for a certain level in the Common European Framework so that we can best help learners to develop skills from where they are up to where they need to reach in order to become, for example, a level A2 learner, right? Even if they are not at this point taking an exam, it's important that they develop those skills. So can-do descriptors are good because they focus, as the name says, they focus on what learners can actually do, right? And you can make use of those things to check and observe their learners and see that at this point, whether or not they can follow very short stories, as we can see here in the illustration. And if they cannot follow short stories, what is it that they need? Do they need more practice with specific set of lexis, or do they need more practice with listening and becoming familiarized with pronunciation and sounds, etc.? So it's very important to use this in order for you to have a reference and to diagnose areas of development with learners. So can-do statements are really good, and so are sample tests, right? As I said, the learners might be sitting the exam just now, they might be sitting the exam in the next couple of months. It's very important to help them become familiarized with a specific exam, but even if they're not sitting the exam just now, this is a great resource for you to practice with certain skills, diagnose areas where learners are doing really well and where learners might need support. And also, one thing about sample tests is that they are usually accompanied by comments from examiners. There is an answer key, so you can use those resources to compare expected performance with the performance of your learners. And I think it adds to your planning. And again, the best thing to do is save time when teachers have been ever so busy with remote teaching and adapting many things, right? Speaking of functions of formative assessment, we have talked about diagnostic assessment. We can think about formative assessment strategies or practices like this. You can use questions, you can ask specific questions for learners. You can make a decision whether you want to ask open or closed questions for specific moments of the lesson or the content that you are delivering. You can have conversations with learners in order to find out how they are feeling, whether the content has been appropriate for them. You can set them a number of tasks. They could be very short, simple, easy to implement tasks, or they can be more elaborate, like a mini project with the learners. And then you assess how they are developing the project, how they are interacting with each other. You can set quizzes, or you can set more formal assessments, like a short test in order to check specific knowledge of something they have just learned. And I mean, we started off with a quiz today, right? Very, very challenging quiz to get people going, to check how much they remembered from Pablo's session. And I'm sure that you're all very knowledgeable. That wasn't challenging for you at all. Also, when we're talking about formative assessment, we need to consider ways for learners to assess themselves, and also for learners to assess each other. And some teachers might ask just now, okay, but my learners don't know how to assess themselves, or they don't have enough knowledge to assess a peer. Well, this is something that needs constructing bit by bit. This is a series of strategies that you need to implement bit by bit, so the learners become familiarized with such practices and they understand the purposes of doing peer and self-assessment, right? And most of all, we cannot forget that we use all of those strategies in formative assessment to provide feedback, which is something we cannot go without when we talk about assessment for learning. Well, talking about formative assessment practices, Rafael, you have something to share with us?
So following up on Alberto's description and examples that he has provided, again, we do believe that self-assessment and peer assessment are extremely, extremely important. Even though some students in the beginning might, or learners might find it difficult to actually check what they have learned, we do have one idea here, which is very simple, which is like a traffic light. Okay, so it is extremely easy. And by the way, you saw that I am interested in neuroscience. That are some articles that actually show some benefits to this. By using something like a traffic light, saying, okay, I think I can do this. Maybe this is green. I'm not sure about this one. I think I'm getting there. Maybe this is yellow, or I need help. I know nothing about this subject, or maybe I even missed that specific day. I didn't pay attention very well. It's very important, again, for the teacher to show and give these tools to students to make sure that they are able to check what they have accomplished. Okay, and again, I'm going to, if you're going to talk a little bit about course books. Some course books, they have that. If they don't, make sure that you implement that yourself by the end of a unit, by the end of a cycle, by the end of the program. Okay. And another tool that we believe that is extremely important, and it actually is a way for learners to share what they have learned and to check what friends or colleagues have done, is the 2 stars and a wish. Okay, so students can actually praise their colleagues and say, look, your speaking is very good. Your presentation skills are very good. And maybe like a wish that they have. Again, this is for them. Maybe you can start by doing that with the students individually in the beginning. And then from that point on, you will start creating a scenario where students is able to self-assess and assess peers, okay, which is extremely important. Okay, so
Thank you,
just
Rafael.
thank you. Yes.
Well, there are many variations to those strategies. Like, for example, if you're talking about writing, you can highlight points in the student's text. You can also do like checks at the end of the class, how students are feeling so far. So they can give you feedback on that. Or you can substitute by physical movements with young learners like thumbs up, thumbs down. So there are many variations to those strategies. Well, you will notice that from the traffic light up to 2 stars and a wish, 2 stars and a wish is a more elaborate strategy, and it requires learners to produce more in terms of feedback, either for themselves or for their peers, right? The other thing we can consider for formative assessment is a portfolio or a compilation of academic work that teachers can organize with learners, and then I encourage learners to keep a portfolio of the things they have been doing, of the feedback they have been getting, of the improvements they have made to certain tasks, right? And students can look at samples of portfolios and justify why the portfolios are useful. One thing that happens with portfolios is that teachers might not see concretely how learners are progressing if the portfolio doesn't come together with criteria. So here we have an example of criteria for a portfolio. The criteria here is for a portfolio for higher education. So we have specific points in the criteria like what is the main topic being discussed. So this is something that the teacher needs to consider and plan together with the portfolio when the process starts. And then you have a number of points in the criteria that are relevant to share with learners so that both teachers and learners can understand what good progression is. So again, going back to making learning visible to learners. So making sure that the points in the criteria are clear for teachers, for learners, they are shared, and that you go to those points and discuss them with learners so the learners can see progress. The good thing about the example here is that this can be adapted to any level. This can be adapted to any age range. This is, of course, not appropriate, I mean, the language for young learners, but you can make adaptations. And we are going to show some examples here, like success criteria and rubrics, right? Well, when we're talking about success criteria, it has to do with building criteria so that you can keep learners aware of what it is that they are being that they are learning and what kind of assessment they are going through. So success criteria focus much more positively on students' ability to succeed. So basically talking about what students can do and not focusing on what they cannot do, right? So they are based on what the students should know, be able to do and understand, and it helps the teacher to decide whether the students have achieved the learning intention or the goals which can be related to the expected performance or the can do, right? And it helps to answer the same question from the point of view of the student. For example, how will I know whether I've achieved the learning intention? So here we have a very simple example of success criteria that you can devise for your learners for a specific activity. It could be just a list of bullet points, like in this case, the task is describe a picture, and students will be successful if they describe where people are using a specific number of prepositions, describe clothes, etc., use 5 to 10 verbs, etc. So this is one way. Also, if the task is more elaborate, if it is lengthier, you can, for example, turn the success criteria into rubrics. So rubrics are good because they include the success criteria and descriptions of a number of different levels of performance in relation to those criteria. So here I have an example of rubrics that comes from the handbooks that we have available for teachers. based on the exams. This is the rubrics for assessing writing. Actually, we have new writing guides, assessing writing guides for teachers. So those rubrics, they bring those descriptions, as you can see in the boxes. They bring subscales. We can see here 3 subscales like content, organization, and language. And we also have the bands for grades that you are going to give learners according to their performance. Another example of success criteria is available here. This is for speaking. So we have subscales such as use of grammar and vocabulary at level A2, pronunciation, interactive communication. We have the descriptors for each of those subscales, and then we have the bands. And then you might say, well, the material I am using does not bring the rubrics. You can access the rubrics from our resources, which are easily available from the website, or teachers can also create their success criteria and rubrics by following a simple pattern. So you have here on the left, you have the bands, so you can decide on the grades that you are going to give your learners. 0 to 5, 0 to 10, it's up to you. You can consider the subscales, and then you need to, after you have the bands and the subscales, you need to devise the descriptors. Then you might ask us, but how can I devise the descriptors? Use the can-do statements from your course books. Usually you have at the beginning of the unit, or you have it in the teacher's book as well. Or you can use the descriptors that we have from the handbooks for teachers, which are organized according to specific CFR levels. And then you can use them as an inspiration for the descriptors here, right? But we have more ideas, Rafael, don't we?
Yes, we do. So we checked previously a kind of traffic light for self-assessment, which is something very simple that we can use in the classroom. And here, from a more managerial perspective, we can take a look at indicators, and we also bring back the idea of traffic light, okay? So again, we can actually cluster this with Alberto's suggestion. We can create our own rubrics. Here, very simply, we identify the skills. So we have speaking, listening, reading, and writing. But you can also create your own rubrics to check students against their performance. But just one idea is that this activity has to be systematic. So if you can either use it every month or every semester, every year, if you're able to keep on following the same students or have the same group, okay? So again, this is just a perspective, because sometimes we are not able to see the whole journey of the student. So again, make sure that you implement the traffic light and possibly create your own rubrics or your own criteria for that specific activity.
Great, Rafael. I would like to summarize the assessment for learning journey, because we talked about traffic light as one idea for formative assessment, self-assessment, peer assessment. We talked about 2 stars and a wish. We talked about a portfolio, which is a more elaborate kind of assessment, and it's longitudinal. It takes a longer period of time. And the idea is that all those stages will better prepare students for the summative assessment, either in the school or external summative assessment, right? So by following those principles and using those strategies, the idea is to help learners and teachers to reflect on goals, process, and progress, foster self and peer assessment, and understand that this is a journey. This is not something that learners will be able to do when you try it first time. It's something that you're going to do step by step. It fosters also critical thinking, because they understand criteria and they can comment and assess by using criteria. And most of all, I think we need to consider formative assessment as a longitudinal process, right? It's something that starts, and it is something that will help learners to become used to it. And the idea, as the learners develop those skills for assessing self or peer, We have least teacher input and most student production. We keep a record of what students have done during the term and continue the portfolio until the end of the course, and so that we have you and your learners will have a visible track of the learning path you have been through, right? So finishing off, analyze your objectives, make sure that whether the objectives are feasible, are attainable, or adapt your objective. You might need to prioritize and choose, right? Then you build checklist. We talked about success criteria. We talked about rubrics here. Design the tasks and the criteria for learners, and then deliver feedback. Feedback is a crucial word here. Make feedback actionable, frequent, and rich, and respond to the results and rethink the next steps, because when you do diagnostic assessment and formative assessment, you might need to change direction now and again, right? And then you start all over again, and that's what teaching is all about, isn't it, Rafael? I think now we are ready for questions. We still have a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rafael. Thank you very much, Alberto. There are lots of thank yous and congratulations on the chat box. So a warm round of applause from everybody.
Thank you.
And we also have a number of questions. So let's try and answer at least some of them. There are a question that has popped up a couple of times is about homework and formative assessment. In your view, is homework formative assessment? How can we help that it becomes that, to make it become that, or is it something different altogether?
Can I start, Rafael?
Please, please.
Okay. Well, homework is by all means formative assessment, and homework is a great way of checking how much learners have grasped something or have developed certain skills of something you have taught very recently. So yes, it's one way of checking progress formatively.
Yes, just 1 second, just to add, what I think, I agree totally with Alberto. One thing that I just would like to change, maybe just a single thought, is not many times the students and teachers actually reflect on the activity that was proposed. Okay, homework is just, sent to students, they just do it and they never actually reflect. So more self-assessment, more reflection, more meta-language within the homework, so they can know, they can, get different ideas and perspectives.
Absolutely. Coming back to this idea that it is the feedback that makes the formative.
Yes.
Another question that has popped up a couple of times was about the rubrics and the assessment criteria that you shared. And two questions that came from that. Number one is where teachers can find these. And number two, if this is something that works for online, offline assessment, or both.
Well, teachers, the ones we showed here, they are available from our website. We are going to send you a handout where you have the link to access the preparation materials for both Michigan and Cambridge Assessment English exams. And they are available from the handbooks for teachers, so feel free to go and download them. It's all free. The other question, Pablo, was
whether this is online teaching, offline teaching, or both.
It's for both. I mean, success criteria can be used for both online and face-to-face. But I would say, Pablo, specifically for remote teaching, I think it's very important that in remote teaching, because learners are working more autonomously, if you provide success criteria beforehand, share that with learners, I think it guides their work when they're not with the teachers, in a synchronous class. So learners are working more autonomously, so give them the success criteria because they will have goals to achieve.
Can I say something really quickly? Because I did this activity actually. If you actually type writing and rubrics and speaking rubrics, you will find different sources. And we believe that is actually very healthy. So make sure that we have given a few of the rubrics here, but make sure that you explore different possibilities. Sometimes you will possibly see the same document, but given two different perspectives. So I think it's actually interesting to check that, because by the end of the day, possibly you will create or you will pick and choose the best that serves your purposes or your learners.
Okay. Pablo, before the last question, can I just say something quickly for the audience? We have the references of the books we have used, the websites, etc. You can download the handout for this session by using this QR code or by typing this link on your browser, and then you'll be able to find the websites, the books, and the references and resources that we used. So don't forget to scan the code before we finish. So sorry, Pablo. Now let's go on to questions.
Sure, and there are two questions that I saved for the end, so I'm going to squeeze one more because you said last, but I am the advocate of our audience. So
Yeah.
one is a question that already popped up on Tuesday's webinar, so it will be interesting to have your take on this, which is, what about self-assessment and learners of different ages? Would you say that, how would you do self-assessment with young learners? Is it a concept that fits, or is it too early?
Rafael, do you want to talk about traffic light?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think as the ages progress, so actually do the activities and the tools that we use. We can possibly start very simply with young learners, maybe using, again, the posters or the word lists. So it could be based on quantity. Maybe you just select in the beginning 5 words and see out of these 5 words, are they able to produce, remember 2, 3, or 4, very simple. And then maybe you move on to the traffic light by showing a picture and identifying, maybe even giving the power of the learner to say, oh, okay, teacher, I know I am a green based on our city poster, or teacher, I am a yellow here because I still have some doubts. So again, I think things should start very simply in the beginning, maybe something very visual. And as we move on and progress towards teenagers, they can become a little bit more challenging. And then adults, possibly like a checklist or something like an Excel file where you actually tick some boxes. But it can be fun for adults as well. So this is my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, for very young learners, I think making self-assessment physical, like saying from 1 to 5, how do you feel? And then they have to show the hands and say 5 if they are really good, or 3 if they are not so good. So, I mean, by showing the fingers, there are many ways you can do self-assessment, making it visual as well for young learners.
Yes.
Absolutely. And one last question then, and I promise this is the last one, is
Keep them
there were
coming.
a number of questions around formative assessment oriented to summative assessment. People who are preparing for a Michigan exam, for a Cambridge exam, how can formative assessment help lead to that? On what kind of things do teachers need to bear in mind?
Well, formative assessment would be good because one advantage of external exams is that they have expected levels of performance. And formative assessment will help the teacher to give feedback on the learner on how close they are to that expected performance. So for example, if they're taking a test and in the oral test, they have to describe images for 1 minute, and they have to kind of use language that will identify where things are in the image. how well can learners do that and how close they are to the expected performance. So formative assessment by giving them practice in this kind of task, each time asking the learner to improve one specific point, and then they will be more confident for the summative assessment.
Yes, I would just like to add that it's like a scaffold. So you know which steps students need to achieve, and then you make sure that the teacher and also the learner is aware of the steps, and the teacher supports them with the specific skills, instruments, and strategies to make sure that they get to the next level.
Right. Thank you very much, Alberto. Thank you very much, Rafael, once again. Dear all, unfortunately, our time for today is, and we have managed to answer some of your key questions. Before we say goodbye, I would like to thank Rafael and Alberto once again, and to remind you of our upcoming session on the 20th of October, that is next Tuesday. And it will be about finding your way, the main differences between multi-level and level-based exams, and we will be talking more about the criteria to consider for selection. So extremely topical and critical issues for schools nowadays. Thank you all for being with us today. If you wish to contact us, please access our website. You're looking at the address right now. A big thank you also to all of our colleagues who are working in the backstage. It takes a village to make a successful webinar, and we have the best village in the Cambridge, Michigan country. And see you all in our next session on Tuesday. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Thank you, Rafael, for joining me in this webinar. And happy Teachers Day, Brazilian teachers, and congratulations to all the teachers around the world.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, all the team that is behind this. Teachers, you are superheroes. So thanks and happy Teachers Day. Thank you.